Two households, both alike in dignity, in fair Verona where we lay our scene, from ancient grudge break to new mutiny, where civil blood makes civil hands unclean.
Drama! A sword-wielding vigilante.
Suspect is armed, extremely dangerous.
The Montagues and Capulets are at it again.
A plague on both your houses!
Two households, both alike in dignity.
Who is this reality star that's rocketed to fame?
Y'all heard about this Romeo fella? He's the talk of the town.
In fair Burbank, where we lay our scene.
Why Juliet Capulet is obviously a witch.
Welcome back to Celebrity Feuds in 60 Seconds.
The Capulets and the Montagues. Leave Juliet alone!
From ancient grudge, break to new mutiny.
This news broke off a part of the fucking internet.
I hate love triangles in media, especially when we all know that they're fake.
Where civil blood makes civil hands unclean.
I am done. I am fed up with seeing this bullshit.
Why are they fighting? Why are they fighting?
Why are they fighting?
From forth the fatal loins of these two foes, a pair of star-crossed lovers take their life.
We have literally lost a legend.
How did this happen?
His bestie's gone forever.
Today we're looking at the wild, true story of the Capulets and the Montagues,
whose misadventured, piteous overthrows do with their death bury their parents' strife.
Sending best wishes to the Capulet and Montague families.
The fearful passage of their death-marked love and the continuance of their parents' rage, which but their children's end naught could remove, is now the 2 hours traffic of our stage.
Welcome to an Each Retelling, the podcast where we explore all the ways old tales are made new. I am your host, Jasmine Garcia, and joining me today are...
Hey, I'm Bex, and I love Shakespeare, and I love the Tri-Dudes. Messed up their name. Shows how big a fan I am.
Hey, I'm Shamila, longtime Shakespeare fan, very new Try Guys fan.
River, mediocre Shakespeare fan, mediocre Try Guys fan.
And I am pretty much in the same boat as Shami. I mentioned this in the podcast before. My 5th grade teacher did a whole ass Shakespeare unit and there was no going back. But the Try Guys have mostly eluded me. Like, I've been aware of them, particularly Eugene. But we'll get further into that as we go on. But
I will be your foremost Try Guys expert for this recording.
We are going to be covering the recent Try Guys production of Romeo and Juliet. The choose your own, I guess it was the choose your own adventure thing? Yeah. It was
choose your own shenanigan.
Yeah, that's way more accurate.
The official title was Romeo and Juliet, Choose Your Own Shakespeare.
Yes, there we go. I knew it was choose your own something. But anyway, since we're getting into that...
So, should we start with Shakespeare or the Try Guys?
Let's do Shakespeare first. What's everyone's relationship with Romeo and Juliet specifically, but also, sure, general Shakespearean stuff?
I'll start. Romeo and Juliet. For me, for some reason, the first Shakespeare play my curriculum at school did was Julius Caesar, which is an interesting one to start on.
Editor Jasmine here. It is a weird coincidence that I wasn't able to bring up during recording that 2 of my dearest friends' first Shakespeare was ill-advisedly Julius Caesar.
And then, of course, we did Mackie B and his Mr. Mackie B, McDonald, Macbeth Man.
You kind of undid the euphemisms by saying that.
We're not in a theater. It's fine.
I know. Sam has yelled at us before.
We covered Julius Caesar, Macbeth, Midsummer Night's Dream, and a little bit of Hamlet. I've played Romeo in the balcony scene in the round in a scene study, and that was very fun to get into the character's mind, because I have many opinions on the character, and a lot of them are showcased brilliantly in the production we're talking about today. But it's good. It's not one of my favorite Shakespeare's. I'm more into his comedies. You could argue this is a comedy of stupid human error, but it is intended to be, it's the, It's a tragedy as youth sees it,
Hi,
that's
Kyle.
the famous quote about it. Oh, hello, Kyle. Love that bit. But that's my experience with Romeo and Juliet.
I have you topped for weirdest starter Shakespeare. I had a Shakespeare year starting in, I want to say 7th grade. I don't think we actually did one in 8th grade, but in 7th grade, my starter Shakespeare was Merchant of Venice.
Oh!
Yikes!
But
that's fascinating.
Yeah, one of the like end of unit projects we had to do was like, we have like a list of options, and one of the options was like, oh, write love songs for the couples. And I'm like, nah, let me write villain songs. Yeah, no, that was my first Shakespeare. And then in 9th grade, I had the obligatory Romeo and Juliet at the end of the year, and I had to write a final paper about that because I like had like an 89 in a class, and you needed the 90 to get out of finals. And I like went to my teacher and I'm like, please boost me by a percentage so I don't have to do this fucking final. And he's like, no. And I'm like, you're the worst, Claire. I lied. Daniel Clare was great. He was a great English teacher. But then from there, we did Caesar in 10th grade. 11th grade, I didn't get one, but we did Midsummer as part of like my theater program because like the winter show was either a Shakespeare or a classic show. So we did Midsummer for that year. And then 12th grade was Hamlet. And I also did Much Ado About Nothing in like 10th grade. I was a stagehand for it. I was responsible for making sure Dogberry's actor got on stage because he was an absolute disaster of a child. To put it softly, there's a reason that every time I saw him after that, I would joke that, hey, you're not dead in a ditch yet. So my thing with Romeo and Juliet is when I was in 9th grade, you can imagine me as a 9th grader. I am me, but worse. And
isn't that
so
us all?
Romeo and Juliet is not the one that I will have like go up to bat strong opinions about. I just sort of vibe with it. You ask me about Hamlet and I'll have strong opinions about Hamlet. You ask me about Much Ado and I'll have like lukewarm to strong opinions about it. I don't have a lot of ride or die opinions about Romeo and Juliet, which is weird considering who I am as a person. I have a lot of ride or die opinions about most things. Romeo and Juliet is not one of those things. I think for me, it's a case of like, I like it in it's an old song and we're gonna sing it again sort of capacity.
Editor Jasmine here. Dear listeners, I wish you could have seen the looks on our faces when they referenced Hadestown.
Can reference because it's a Broadway, so.
And it's almost fallen. Alas, I could not get the Persephone and Hades episode I wanted off the ground, so at least we got something.
Every time someone else does it with something a little weird, I'm like, okay, let's vibe with this. And it has similar but not the same barometric as I have for my Cinderella retellings. My Cinderella retelling barometric is, if I buy for even 5 seconds that the stepmother might win, it's a good adaptation.
Ooh.
With Romeo and Juliet, it is if I buy even for 10 seconds that these crazy kids might make it, it's a good adaptation. Which is probably why I have mixed opinions about West Side Story as a musical, but that's neither here nor there. I have more opinions about West Side Story than I do about Romeo and Juliet, which is telling. But yeah, that's my experience with that, and then I guess we'll do the Try Guys as a separate opinion piece.
That's the idea, yeah.
So I was in the AP English unit at my school, and of course we had a Shakespeare unit. So 9th grade we did Merchant of Venice, and then 10th grade we did 12th Night, and then 11th grade we did Romeo and Juliet in conjunction with Pride and Prejudice.
Interesting.
Hell of a double feature.
Yeah.
I've never read it.
Neither
Pride
have I,
Prejudice.
it's fine.
Sorry, Jane.
Jane, you're a G. We just haven't gotten around to it.
Yeah.
It was like a little impatient teenager just didn't want to like go through with it because there was so much human error going on there. Like, it wouldn't have ended in a tragedy if either the parents were supportive or if Romeo and Juliet had actually communicated, then we wouldn't have gotten all of this.
Well, they're teenagers. Can you really expect them to be good at communicating, especially in the pre-iPhone era?
And to be fair, technically, Romeo and Juliet in itself is a retelling.
That is true. We didn't quite get to that with the other Romeo and Juliet episode we did.
Shakespeare, it's him retelling of an old poem.
They were basically named a more Italian-sounding version of Romeo and Juliet, basically. The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet by Arthur Brooke, from back in 1562. Kyle mentioned this in one of his Shakespeare Month videos. Yep, again, hi Kyle.
Hey.
And basically what's interesting about that, like he emphasized how it was more explicitly about you need to obey your parents, kids, or this could happen kind of thing.
Oh, morality tales.
Exactly. It was very much a morality tale aimed at the kid.
Glad we've all started to see those as bullshit that they are.
Yeah, we really have, thankfully. Because the main issue with Romeo and Juliet, and I have seen this ever since I was a kid, because unlike all of you, Romeo and Juliet basically was one of my first, along with a picture book of A Midsummer Night's Dream.
Really?
And yeah, it's this gorgeous picture book that I've actually been trying to get a hold of for years because it is...
That sounds delightful.
It is, yeah. If I find it, I will absolutely direct you all to it. It had such beautiful art, I remember. And Sam, that's another thing Sam and I shockingly have in common. But anyway, my 5th grade teacher also had us basically do an abridged version of Romeo and Juliet. Like, I did Juliet's death scene for the class.
Age 10?
11, but yeah. Yeah, no, I did Juliet's death scene at an age closer than most actresses who have played her, probably.
Wow.
Please tell me it was a dramatic death.
Oh, fuck yes, it's me we're
It's
talking
Jasmine.
about.
They brought the drama.
Oh yes, especially if you add preteen hormones, please.
Mm.
The Jasmine you know now is a much more measured version. I probably would have annoyed the shit out of you guys as a kid.
Oh, bless.
But anyway, yeah, I do have some hard opinions about Romeo and Juliet. It bothers me how hard it feels like the internet is on these kids.
It should be harder on the adults in the situation.
Absolutely. Like, that is my one hard opinion. It's like, no, we're not blaming these children when they're essentially in a war zone.
I think it's because for most people with Romeo and Juliet, when you grow up, you read it like around the age of these kids. And you're like,
if I was in this situation, I would be smarter about it, you know?
Exactly. The Romeo and Juliet you read as a kid is very different from the Romeo and Juliet you see as you get older.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
In my opinion.
I mean, for me, it was basically, I was already borderline depressed, and it just kept on kind of going down as I got further into my teen years. So I really vibed with it partially because of that, because I was a lonely, romance-starved teenage girl.
Who is it?
You know, this probably isn't Struck. I do remember there's a Romeo and Juliet manga out there I saw in a Stratford-upon-Avon bookstore way back in the day.
That tracks. Romeo and Juliet is one of those stories that you don't need to do a lot of cultural translation to do.
Is it one of his most adapted works?
Yeah, people really do love a forbidden romance because I feel like we've all had some kind of relationship, even if it's unrequited, where it's just like, oh, we can't be together.
Romance. With big quotation marks around the ro part of the romance.
Yeah, well, here's the thing. I've said it before. To me, it doesn't really matter whether or not these kids were soulmates. What matters is they should have had the chance to kind of let the relationship go naturally.
Agreed. So where do the Try Guys come into all of this?
I've mentioned this before. The Try Guys, I've been aware of them, but I've never really actively gotten into their stuff. The most I had gotten into their stuff was in a certain scandal that happened last year.
Well, we're not going to talk about that because that doesn't deserve to be talked about. The only thing I think we should comment on is that the other 3 chief members of the company handled that in a very professional and dignified manner.
Yes.
And since then, the company has been thriving. And they made what is an extremely difficult decision to cancel, because they filmed videos months in advance. So they made the extremely difficult decision to cancel and lose a lot of revenue. But I think they handled it extremely well. I suppose my relationship with the Try Guys has probably been the longest, considering I must have been watching them since probably 2018. And watching them pretty religiously ever since. So that's a long time. And of the 3 boys, I know Zach went to my college alma mater. Hey, Emerson College, treat your students better. And
treat your LA campus better.
Treat your LA campus better, that too. Also, big relation to Zach. Zach's also Jewish, grew up in the same area around me. We're both chronically ill, disabled, but I've always looked up to that. And he's the most underappreciated. And I love Zach Kornfeld so much. I think you're really cool, dude. Probably not going to hear this, but if you do, hi. Then, of course, we have Keith, who went to school for theater / French horn and was in an off-Broadway show this past year with his band, Lou Berger. They had Lou Berger and the Wizard of Friendship, which is a sold-out off-Broadway show. And Keith has always been known to be like the theatrical one. And then, of course, we have Eugene, who has done
too much. Honestly, too much.
The most professional acting work of the boys by far, at least in recent years. He had a gorgeous coming out video that was trending on YouTube, and it was a beautiful dance piece. He's iconic. He's everywhere. He brings it with the fashion. He's got cute dogs. As literally said in a Lou Berger song, Lou Berger will also be coming up a lot for me in this, because Huey Stonefish did the live music, scoring for Try Guys Romeo and Juliet. As noted in the song Keith and the Band, in the Keith's verse, and you know, he's not wrong. I love them all, but he's not wrong. That Eugene has the most mainstream commercial, people know who he is. So I have the Try Guys book with modifications to the cover. I followed them for a very long time. The videos make me laugh. They're Eat the Menus with Keith, someone to keep you company when you're eating alone in your house. Zach's videos about dealing with his illness always make me cry. And they're really funny guys that are actually willing to put their money behind where their mouth is and stand up for what's right and really try new things, and just generally have always been about saying F you the traditional masculinity. So I like them. I like them a lot.
They seem like a lot of fun.
When I say I'm a mediocre fan of them, I mean, I've been following them since prior to their spinoff from the megacorp eating the internet. The other megacorp eating the internet.
Prior to them forming Second Try, which is their production company.
Yeah, but I'm not consistent with them. Like, I'll poke my head in every once in a while, being like, oh, what are you guys, like, doing here? And, you know, like, I'll watch a video every once in a blue moon if I've sort of run through everything else on my subscriptions, or, like, the only thing left in my pile of subscriptions is a massive, 3-hour H Bomber Guy video, and I'm like, okay, I need a minute to get to that. But, like, I have such deep, I do not want to know anything about anyone that I am a fan of unless it is atrocious, so I can stop supporting them, because I don't know how to put this without sounding like a crazy person. I was a weird 14-year-old, and thus knowing everything about everyone was just the way my brain worked, because I have too much lore in my head about everything, and it got really bad when it came to real life people. So I have just decided to not give myself the opportunity. I don't know shit about fuck. And I prefer to keep it that way. Every time my friend tries to subject internet drama to me, it is against my will, because I like knowing nothing about the people I follow online, unless it is truly atrocious, and then I will, learn it so I can stop supporting them. But otherwise, like, when the bullshit that we're not talking about happened, I was just sort of like, all right, proceed. Like, I was like, okay, like, good on y'all for doing the best, enjoying the memes as they came up. But other than that, like I don't consistently follow them, because they're one of like 5 billion internet personalities trying to wrangle for my brain, and sometimes they just get the short end of the stick. They're the videos I would most likely like binge in a single sitting if like all of my other YouTube videos would be like, no one's uploaded anything in a while, because I follow way too many video essayists that put like 40-minute, hour-long videos and like drops over the course of months, and I'm like, okay, no one else has uploaded anything because everybody else is working on these really big projects. Let's just binge a few Try Guys videos, I'm a mediocre casual fan is, I think, the best way to put it.
So for me, I generally live under a rock when it comes to internet personalities.
Smart. Wish that were me.
Because I don't generally seek it out. Like, if it doesn't come across my feed, I am unaware. And, well, my first sort of introduction to the Try Guys was that video of them on the subway with Keith trying to get Eugene to sit in his lap.
Iconic classic.
So what is up with that exactly? Did it just start from that video, or?
I believe the gag literally just is they were on a trip to New York City and there was nowhere to sit. And Keith was like, you can sit on my lap. And there was a bit. It's a bit. Yeah. And the bit kept going. The bit grew legs. The bit grew so many legs. Keith literally, in the later video, turned himself into a chair that transforms and pops out. The trick Eugene is sitting on his lap.
Oh, yeah.
And Eugene, despite his protestations, usually ends up in this video crying from laughing so much.
The bit spawned legs and then sprinted.
Yeah. It's a welcome bit that even gets some airtime in the very play we are talking about today.
Exactly. So I'm going to keep this in because it actually is kind of relevant.
Indeed.
It wasn't until my friend, who is a big Try Guys fan, she started sending me videos of that recipe, and I thought they were hilarious. But my first proper introduction was their retech version of Try Guys Try Drag.
Yes! So that was one of their first videos with Conglomerate Place that they used to work at. And I'm so sorry, Shami. I just want to give a little background. That video was like back when they were super, super condensed. That video is only like 7-10 minutes long. And it's the Try Guys doing drag for the first time. They all have their drag moms. They did a drag performance. It's very cute. It's very fun. Years later, they realized they still have all this footage. This is now when they're with Second Try. This was a couple of years ago. And they were like, let's do the full episode how we would do it now. So they released, it's like a 45-minute video of the whole process. And it's a lot more involved. And they took it seriously. And it's the coolest video. And shout out to Eugene in particular, because Eugene ended up like loving and doing drag from time to time. So that's cool.
Thus adding to his gay icon quota.
Icon.
Yeah. And then from there, I started like looking at other videos that my friend would send me. And then I found their YouTube channel. And that's when I started subscribing. And I just love their whole dynamic and the way that they like dive into whatever they're trying to do. Like, and yeah, I just love their dynamic with Johnny Cakes and Quasi.
Yes, the new era, the orange era, which has turned into the new neon era of Try Guys, where they've just been bringing in a whole bunch of people, Try Friends, the Try Team, the Try Fam, if you will. There are some banger people that they've got on their team now.
And then we got Rachel, the Try Mom.
Rachel Cole, the greatest Try Guys not so secret weapon, because she's on screen a lot. She co-directed Romeo and Juliet Choose Your Own Shakespeare, along with Keith, actually. They worked on that together. Rachel was their first hire, I believe.
Yes.
And she is the executive producer and creative officer. Also with Nick Rufka, who's also amazing, executive producer and chief operations officer. But Rachel is truly the secret weapon of the Try Guys.
She's a hero of her own story, pretty much. Former pageant queen, former nanny, former kindergarten teacher, breast cancer survivor, and mother to twins.
Wow.
Rachel's cool. And she's also on the spin-off podcast of The Tripod, You Could Sit With Us, which is the podcast with Becky Habersberger, Keith's beautiful, lovely wife. The Try Wives, as they are so called, the partners of the Try Guys.
That is delightful. Oh my gosh. Like, I have to say, I mostly knew of them from just silly, goofy stuff, but this is all sounding very wholesome.
They are cool. I love them. And this in particular, they haven't done anything like this before. They've dabbled a little bit in tiny scripted bits they've done. Because even I didn't see their live tour, but I've seen the movie and some of it. It's scripted, but it's still them. This is completely like, no, we are doing a play. Shakespeare, especially Shakespeare, for some of them being untrained actors.
Yeah, one of my first literal notes is, oh, we're texted here at That Is a Surprise. When you tell me Try Guys, Romeo and Juliet, the first thing that pops into my head is like loose plot, like we're still plot adherent, but we're gonna be modern language adaptation, with, room to improv, room to riff, and what have you. So the minute Shakespeare starts coming out of these fuckers' mouths, I'm like, oh, okay, let's go.
And yeah, the fact that it is really most of people's first Shakespeare is, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say it was the best Shakespeare I'd ever seen, but I'm still pretty impressed with how well done it was.
Do you want me to go into a bit about
how this came to be? Yeah, please.
Yeah. So as far as I know, as far as I was following, Try Guys, Romeo and Juliet Choose Your Own Shakespeare, I think it was announced a bit in late May, and it was going to be June 15th. And then on June 7th, they made a big announcement. They were like, interest has been so large and invested in this that they didn't want to half-ass it. So they pushed it all the way back to August 10th so that they had time to refine. They had time to get off book. They had a whole series of videos leading up to the big event. They did Try Guys Try Shakespeare in Fashion, which was them trying on all how people used to dress. Try Guys Go to Shakespeare Academy, which was them both learning about Shakespeare, learning how to act with Shakespeare, included a bit of mixing of learning how to act in tension with a certain scene based on options that were given. given, i.e. played a love scene while Keith is running around trying to pants Zach. As a bit of help for this, and they did Try Guys Try Sword Fighting with actual fight choreography. And I know that for the show, they rehearsed, so each Choose Your Own Adventure part had 3 different options, and they did rehearse each version of each option, so they were prepared for all scenarios. And they roped a bunch of who's who of who's hot on the internet right now. So while the Try Guys spoke in the classical text, it was also, the show was like an hour? Maybe 2?
Hour and a half. Like that.
Hour and a half. They cut a lot. So what they would do is they would have these interludes by, for example, Sam Reich from Game Changer, from Dropout, would come on and do like a briefing, or Sophia Nygaard would do like a little, this is where we are now. They had a bunch of those cameos by a bunch of people, but all from, they were self-aware. I don't know, what's the right word?
The way I described it at the start was, we're running an in-costume social media AU.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is how the prologue, Two Households
Oh,
Both
the
Alike in
prologue.
Dignity decides to frame what's going on. Like, it's running with the assumption that Romeo and Juliet and the Montagues and the Capulets are sort of like, for lack of a better phrasing, they're just the Kardashians of this world.
Yeah.
And so
It really is, though. They are, that is a really interesting way to play it. They are the Kardashians of Verona.
And I think running it with that, and they're like, so the social media, like having all of these other YouTubers and internet creators in makes sense. This now means that petition to get Keith on Make Some Noise. But
Zach's already been on actually once or twice. There's no excuse for Keith not to get up and make some noise. Let's make it happen, guys.
I think Eugene would be hilarious on Game Changer.
No, I want the Try Guys on Dirty Laundry.
Oh, absolutely.
The Try Guys and Quasi James on Dirty Laundry.
The Try Guys tried Dimension 20, though.
They did do a D&D episode.
Yeah. Like, oh, did they?
The
Okay.
Try Guys, yeah.
It's funny you guys mentioned the prologue, because if anything, my one lukewarm critique of this whole adventure, because spoiler alert, I freaking adored this for all of its insanity. I do kind of wish they had continued the exact tone that they did have for the prologue for the interludes. Because the interludes, while yes, it is still kind of playing off the social media AU, they are basically saying, no, we're basically just summing up what's happened between the actual scenes we're playing out, as if, we know it's a play. It is breaking the fourth wall in that.
The prologue was like a fully shot movie trailer.
Yeah, it was. It was great. I loved it.
And so I feel like I understand where you're coming from, Jazz, because it lost a bit of that intensity. They were still really cool segments. Oh, yeah. But the prologue was like fully orchestrated. Like, there's cuts, there's shots, there's edits, there's all this stuff.
Stock footage.
There is stock footage.
And they're playing it as if, it is a social media AU where these are massive celebrity families. And
yeah, I would have liked to see a little bit more follow through to that, because we would have seen like a common thread throughout these like interstitials.
I do appreciate the fact that Ryan and Shane called their segment Spooky Spark Notes.
Yes!
Spooky Spark Notes, yes.
I just have that written in all caps in my notes, so I feel like it needs a shout out.
Yeah, no.
I also would like to shout out Smosh for doing their Reddit stories bit with Shane, Courtney, and a surprise shot of Kimmy, who used to be a Smosh cast member and now has moved more into the production side. Big head of production or something. Sorry I forgot your title wrong, Kimmy. You're great. But I was very pleasantly surprised to see pop up in an on-camera bit.
Yeah, I will say the Smosh segment was like the closest it got to kind of keeping with that through line, because they're basically just reading it on Reddit.
They also had a lot of interesting, going into the show itself, a lot of interesting double cast roles. It was a small cast. It was a cast of about
6, maybe.
Like, you could probably write an essay on the double casting choices. I found those very interesting.
The actress for Benvolio. Oh.
There were, 8 principal cast members.
Okay, fair
And then there were a bunch of cameos from people like Devin, who is in the Try team, popped up as like a messenger, like moving set pieces and stuff, as we all have done in our theater productions.
Yeah. Your obligatory get everything off the stage as fast as humanly possible.
My favorite doubling was that the actor playing Tybalt was also doubled as the actor playing Paris.
Right?
Oh, yeah.
And the apothecary. Yeah. I just found that fun as heck.
Like I said, you could definitely write an essay on these double casting choices.
Almost every Try Guy, except for Zach, I believe, was double cast. So when Eugene is the prince at the end of the play,
Which is
for obvious reasons. But at the beginning of the play, the prince is Keith. I need to go on a tangent about Keith Habersberger for a minute.
Go for it.
We knew this was coming.
Guys, Keith is a revelation in this show.
He really is.
He's so good. Obviously, I was like, okay, he's good at the prince. He knows how to do a commanding voice bit. I've seen him do Funny Wizard before. I was like, yeah, he's great. But his performance as Juliet is kind of a revelation, especially in the beginning. You're like, okay, it's Keith. No, he's fully committed to playing this vulnerable young kid.
Keith, he never plays it as a guy in a dress.
No.
He always plays it as like, no, I am Juliet.
I am taking this seriously. This is a teenage girl whose feelings are 100% valid, and I'm going to treat her with respect.
His Where for Art Thou Romeo monologue was so good. One of my first notes is literally just, Keith is kind of a revelation. And he is.
He might be one of the best Juliets I've ever seen. Saying that.
One of my notes is, why do I buy Zach and Keith more than some more quote-unquote legit Romeo and Juliets? Like, I don't know if it's the combination of how many years they've spent working together, so they have that level of, like, comfortability with each other.
They also are, Zach and Keith are some of the closest. Keith officiated Zach's wedding.
Yeah.
Like
it's this level of, like, there's a reason there's a lot of Romeo and Juliet showmances, because you can't do this material without things bubbling.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that gets in the way sometimes when you're doing it night after night after night. But having these two dudes, these two buddies, these two best friends fully commit to their dicking around in these roles is truly iconic.
And also, Zach, who's by far the one that, I don't know if he'd ever wanted to go into acting, but he was always more of a director, film, writer guy.
He strikes me as a tech kid.
Yes. We love you, Zach.
I say this as somebody who is a tech kid. He strikes me as a tech kid.
You recognize
all that saying, he was good. They were all really good. They all worked really hard. I know they all had like acting lessons and acting coaches and Shakespeare lessons. They were all really good, but there was something about Keith.
I have the note that Eugene is definitely taking inspiration for his portrayal of like the nurse from a family member. I don't know who, but every time I watch Eugene, I'm like, you have an aunt. You have an aunt or your mother. Something is in that performance, and I'm like, you are taking inspiration from the women in your life, Eugene. I know who you are as a person.
I totally think that he's taking inspiration from his mother, because she's appeared in like several Try Guys videos.
Yeah.
And, like, the attitude. That is all her.
Oh, I love that. And that, I was going to say, like, I fully expected, like, when I realized Eugene was playing Mercutio, I was like, oh yeah, obviously. But if anything, I think he was way better as the nurse.
Yeah. Also, so the cool thing about this was they had multicam, so you could watch the show, but you could also watch what was happening backstage behind the scenes. And shout out to my college acquaintance, MJ, who works at Try Guys. I saw on their TikTok, I don't believe these champagne bottles were ever used in the show, correct me if I'm wrong, but there was a shot, Eugene balancing two champagne bottles while he's limboing on his fake breasts while he's dressed up as the nurse. It really just captured the vibe of the entire night.
Yeah.
I text my friend, like, this is just the plot of Anne Juliet. And MJ was like, yeah, it's got that essence.
I could see the connection, absolutely.
So many of the nurse scenes, too, were just the most ridiculous choices possible.
And
more chosen.
More gimmick Shakespeare.
Yes.
Where's that one video one of the Shakespeare companies was doing that? It's like, I think it's like a comedy Shakespeare company, but but the only clip that's running around is Romeo and Juliet's death scene, except every time someone rings a bell, they have to eat a hot wing.
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
And it's like, essentially the joke is that like there seems to be like a thing of suggestions in a hat, and at some point throughout the play, someone pulls out a suggestion and they have to add to that to the thing, sort of like what we're talking about today. But for that case, what it was is every time someone rings a bell, they had to eat a hot wing. Like someone came out with like a bowl of hot wings and they had to eat one. So imagine trying to get through Romeo and Juliet's death scene while you're devouring like buffalo hot wings.
So it was a very similar shenaniganery as with this particular
pick
production.
your shenanigan.
That's amazing.
Juliet's first scene, the entire time, her mom and the nurse are feeding her bananas.
Yep, because that was what won the poll. What were the other choices?
I don't remember for that one. I do remember for one in particular, there was a later scene with Juliet and her nurse, and there was do the whole scene with the dog, and Pesto, Eugene's middle child and goodest boy, stole the show.
I just have to note good dog.
Stealer. Like, I was just concentrating on like how chill this dog was during the scene. Emma would have been just so nervous and like.
And Kimbop is a monster.
Yeah, he'd be racking his head off during that scene.
Oh no.
So, the trampolines. Fucking the trampolines!
I'm gonna say it. I want to see more love confessions happen on trampolines. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Gimmick. Shakespeare.
The scene in which they confess their first love was done on trampolines. I do remember one of the other options, and they filmed brief little spots showing you what other options are in preparation for the show. One of them, I do believe, was do the scene like it's a horror movie. And I gotta say, the trampoline was just, they went with the right choice.
Oh yeah. Like, don't get me wrong, I love me some horror movie references, but I'm glad they went with this.
Just the way that Zach and Keith were able to retain chemistry.
Well, bouncing on tiny trampolines. Because they
had some of the silliest choices possible.
Yeah. The thing about tiny trampolines, as someone who has been on one of them in their time, is that you do not get much bounce on them. So I cannot imagine having to do a Shakespearean monologue while you are also trying to bounce on this no-bounce tiny trampoline. The fact that you can understand them at all is some miracle of breath control.
Well, I think it kind of works in this contest because Zach is so much shorter than Keith.
Okay!
I just like the idea of a tall, funny Juliet with a tiny stoner Romeo.
Short King Romeo.
Justin Bieber Romeo. We have to talk about Zach's wig.
The emo hair!
I mean, the emo hair works because Romeo kind of is an original emo.
Yeah,
he is the original fuckboy.
I just have emo hair Zach, my beloved.
What I appreciate about because he is absolutely playing Romeo as a fuckboy, but he's playing him as a lovable fuckboy. And that I can rock with as someone who defends the kids. Like, you can buy that he does genuinely feel for Juliet while still being a fuckboy.
Because he's a fuckboy. And they're all the same.
Should we talk about the stage combat and the choices that were chosen?
Fighting with dildos!
So good.
I know. So there were a couple options for the first fight between Mercutio and Tybalt. There were options for pool noodles, I think like straws, or, dildos. And the audience did what internet audiences will do. So that led to everyone's deaths in those scenes. Both Mercutio's and Tybalt's. Spoilers for the show. Sorry, it's...
Spoilers for a 1,000-year-old play,
Rocks fall, everyone dies is really the plot of Romeo and Juliet. But their deaths were rather phallic in nature.
Yes.
And I will say, so many groin shots.
And I will say Benvolio's bit about, hey, maybe let's not do this on the street. It has a whole new meaning when dildos are involved.
Not only did they use dildos for the first fight, for the second fight they used
even
floppier
ones.
Longer, anatomically incorrect dildos. And it was
hysterical.
It was
so
good.
much.
It was so good though.
Yeah, I think what the gimmick Shakespeare added is that it kept the comedy in place. The comedy is so often when it comes to Shakespeare, for modern audiences, the comedy is always the first thing that gets lost in translation.
Yeah.
Simply because what is funny to an Elizabethan audience is perhaps not always as funny to us, especially when you're doing a straight text retelling where you have to sort of figure out how to get across this is very obviously ye old dick joke. The old adage that if you don't get a line in Shakespeare, it's probably a dick joke. Where that's not always true, but that's true 80% of the time. Where the other 20% of the time, it's a mythology reference that is absolutely layered in textual evidence. Hamlet, I'm looking at you. The Try Guys do a really great job, and I don't know if it's, because of the way that like their Shakespeare Academy went or whatever, but they did a really great job of translating all of that like comedic elements, and like the gimmicks helped. Like you can't not laugh at a scene where someone is sword fighting with a floppy ass dildo. Like that's not something a person is not gonna giggle at, unless for some reason you're an absolute goddamn madman who thinks that there should be no sex jokes in anything, in which I question your existence. But even in scenes where there is no gimmick, they do a good job of like the opening scene where there isn't, the gimmicks have not yet been introduced. The whole you bite your thumb at me, sir. They do lean into how like that is basically the equivalent of like flipping somebody off, and I think it translates really well. So good on them for that, man.
I mean,
and they really play into the whole, because I think everyone always forgets, like, Shakespeare is not some high-class, highbrow theater. It's all, most of it is dick jokes and, like, lowbrow humor. And the guys really play into that.
Yeah, no, Shakespeare was the people's theater back in the day. It's only around the Victorian era where they were trying to kind of just over-elevate anything the Empire had ever done that it started being seen that way, and to the detriment of the medium, in my humble opinion.
I did want to just shout out real quick Shakespeare company they worked with, which is Indie Shakes, Independent Shakespeare Company. It's a nonprofit org in LA, and they do Shakespeare. They do a bunch of free Shakespeare in the park, and there were some ensemble members from their company in the Try Guys performance, particularly Brent Charles, who was the double cast Tybalt in Paris, and your name is so beautiful, I'm gonna mess it up. Bukola Ogmonga as Benvolio and Balthazar, and also their production, Lenore Pitts, was their acting and Shakespeare coach, and she also worked with ISC in the past. I know Watcher, shout out to Watcher, also did an episode of We Are the Wonderful World with that same company a couple years ago, promoting them. So they seem like a cool independent company.
Shout out to them.
And shout out to them.
Yeah, no, I do want to circle back to our Benvolio, actually. What I really loved about her performance is because I've always seen Benvolio as the only sane man here, pretty much. Like, he is one of the few people who's, like, being rational. Is just like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be doing this. He's the one trying to break up the fights, pretty much.
There's a reading that I read, like, a long-ass time ago that the reason Benvolio stops having lines after Mercutio dies is that he's just like so wrapped up in the grief of it all that he sort of sees the downward spiral coming, and he's just like, the last time no one listened to me, somebody fucking died. I can't do anything else. Like this,
my best
it's
friend
all downhill
died,
from here.
because you do get the sense they're very least best friends. I mean, I personally ship it, but that's another story.
Yeah, Benvolio's like literally the last one standing after all of this.
Yeah, I do kind of want more retellings kind of dealing with the fact he kind of is the sole survivor. But anyway, one thing I did like about her is that while yes, she's definitely still playing him as the only sane man here, she also does still kind of play him as being really playful and almost
the Queen Mab scene.
Yeah.
Dear kindly Sergeant Krupke.
Also, can I just say, I fully forgot that Paris dies in Romeo and Juliet.
Oh!
Yeah.
For some reason, I assumed he was gonna make it to the end, and when Romeo kills him, I was like, oh! I was legitimately shocked when we were watching it together. I was like,
Death by dance-off.
Yeah.
Did they oh, that's true. It was a dance-off.
Yeah.
That final, not only was it death by dance-off, the way Romeo and Juliet killed themselves was getting high.
And ice bucket challenge.
But no, that was, I do feel like I could have used, I get that it was wrapping up and the silliness was, it's hard to not be silly when you're dying by death by bong. I did feel like it, for me, at the end, it lost a little bit of the wholehearted commitment to like the truth of the story. At the end, I would have loved a little more emotional truth out of Juliet's death, but like, again, that's small potatoes. Also, Keith co-directed the whole thing. He had a lot.
Yep.
On his mind. And why was his opening monologue as the prince so good? And then why was the choice to have the prince be double cast with Eugene at the end in the same wig Eugene was wearing but all in all, God, it was good. And the set. They used their own office space. They completely transformed their office space.
That is so cool.
Oh wait, that one last thought with Eugene playing the prince at the end. I know that someone had the thought Eugene wasn't playing the prince in that end. He was playing Mercutio.
Oh.
He was playing Mercutio, seeing the aftermath of everything.
Given his A Plague on Both Your Houses, I think that's an interesting read.
Yeah.
Mercutio just popping up at the end and be like, I told you so.
Yes.
This is what happens. This is what happens when you don't listen to me.
Editor Jasmine here. And now I desperately want a production of Romeo and Juliet where all the dead people remain on stage as ghosts. And they are the ones that speak that final monologue from the prince. I really feel like that could be some chilling stuff. Ooh, especially if the For ne'er was there tale of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo was spoken by Romeo and Juliet. Oh God. Somebody please stage this production. I want to see it.
This is completely in character of him. And if that was a deliberate show, I thought I applaud them.
You know what? I accept this headcanon. I actually think it fixes the ending a little bit.
Oh, also, there was live music for the entire show. Huey Stonefish. Emmy Award-winning Huey Stonefish, puppet history composer aficionado, part of Louberger. Delightful also has a good solo career. He has a new album out. Go stream it. Huey Stonefish did live music for the entire show. What a delight.
I have a note about the music.
Yeah?
There are several moments in this show where the way that Huey is playing sounds like we're about to break into a musical number.
Right?
Like he's playing the lead up and I'm like, are we about to break it? Like, I wouldn't put it past these fuckers to not break into a musical number right now.
I'd be here for it.
And so, like, 3 of my notes are just, are we breaking into a musical number?
I mean, if Keith had his way, probably.
Yes.
True.
He pretends he doesn't know the lyrics, but we know he does.
Of course he does.
Shout out to that Louberger bit.
This is Hello from Book of Mormon.
And I know the word.
And I don't.
Hello. My name is Elder Price, and I would like to share with you the most amazing book.
Hello. My name is Keith, and the book is by R.L. Stein. It's one of those goosebumps.
Huey was definitely playing White People Taco Night at one point.
You think so?
Yeah.
Was he really?
He was!
Oh, that's amazing. Oh my God. For that, I'm going to see if I can find time to listen for that now.
Yes, there is still time to buy the ticket, I do believe.
Yes, there is. By the time this episode drops, there will technically be 5 days left for you to buy a ticket. So, let's talk more about those interstitials, shall we?
We kicked it off. The first one was with the very own Ghoul brothers, yes. Ryan and Shane, with the
Spooky
Verona
Spark
Files.
Notes. Spooky Spark Notes.
That was a fun, scripted improv. You can never tell with those two little bits. That was a delight. Also, I'm just saying, I want to see Shane in Much Ado About Nothing as Dogberry.
Yeah.
Absolutely! 1,000 out of 10!
Shane Bidet, if you're listening, listen, try guys, if you need a cast for Much Ado About Nothing, listen, here's what you do. You lean into the Q gene. You gotta do Keith as Benedict and Eugene as Beatrice.
Keith as Benedict, Eugene as Beatrice, and let me see, who else? Who is playing Hero?
Zach. Let Zach play multiple roles this time.
Yes.
Just Shane Bidet as Dogberry.
That's
Wait,
a revelation.
Doesn't Dogberry have an assistant? Can we please just make that Ryan?
Yes.
Sure, why not? Imagine his I am an ass bit. Like,
I think I just hurt myself thinking about that.
If you'll excuse me,
we're never gonna get it.
If you'll excuse me, I have to go to LA. I got a pitch.
But yeah, this is one of those parts where I really would have loved it if they had continued leaning into the idea that this is their reality. Doing their whole bit as if Romeo and Juliet was real would have been just chef's kiss. I still, of course, enjoyed it as it is because it's Shane and Ryan. You can't go wrong with those two as far as I'm concerned.
They even brought in the fathers of the internet scene, Good Mythical Morning.
Yes.
Popped in for a bit. We had Game Changer was the most shocking bit because I had...
Sam, what are you doing here?
It was like, Sam Reich?
Sam and his poorly failing green screen.
Yeah, that was...
Because you can clearly tell that he's filming it on his couch with a green screen. But they've green screened it to look like the Game Changer set. And I'm like, Sam, you own the company. Could you not have just like borrowed the set post-filming one day? Because these are all like pre-filmed and sent in advance. You couldn't just borrow the set one day after filming your last round.
He's only the CEO. How much power does he have in that company? There was a Matt Pat bit that was good. There was Sophia Nygaard, Rosanna Pansino, Manny MUA, who I kind of knew him from Escape the Night. That's a throwback.
I did not know who he was, but I adored his whole vibe. So his bit in the prologue, why are they fighting? Why are they fighting? It's like, I've been asking that since I was 11, dude. But yeah, no, Matt Pat was a big surprise for me. And I mean, just leave Juliet alone.
Broadway producer Matt Pat.
True.
Justice.
God, what a sentence.
Justice for the Grey House, which I loved. And if it had been off Broadway, I believe it would be still running today. But it just couldn't find the market on Broadway because that's really tough. But I forgot Kelsey Impeche.
Yes.
From 100 Babies Challenge.
Yes, I was so pleasantly surprised. River.
I recognized a grand total of like 5 people in this, and clearly I'm in the right corners of the internet.
Okay, to give some context, basically she used to work for BuzzFeed, which, sorry about that, hon. But
aren't we all?
Yeah. But she did a video series where she did the Sims 400 Baby Challenge, and it was a delight. She did a whole musical number where she finally won.
Moved to Del Sol Valley, just a girl and her dream to have a lovely family, a kid or 2, it seemed. But then something compelled me to have a couple more. So I had 100 babies. I had 100 babies and Sims 4.
I love her dearly, and so that's why she was showing what was going on The Sims, basically. This wasn't one of the interstitials, but I did want to give a shout out to Jack Frost's Reel on TikTok, because one of her videos did pop up in there. I did show it in the chat, because she talks a lot about particularly how media portrays women, and she had a whole series about why Juliet Capulet is in fact a witch.
Oh.
Could read it as if like some of the foreshadowing that creeps in is her accidentally cursing herself in Romeo, which personally I would love to see a production that leans into that. But although if you go by that, there are some lines where Romeo is also kind of predicting what's gonna happen. So like, fuck it, witchcraft version of Romeo and Juliet, I'm here for it.
Wild.
Quick, before Jenna Ortega gets too old.
Ooh. That would be awesome.
I mean, she's gonna get typecasted, but still.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like Juliet's different enough from most of her other roles. Also, unicorn cupcakes seem like an excellent cure for being sad about a sad story.
Yeah, both of them really commit to dramatic depression at the end, where they're like so distraught over the whole ordeal. It's the commitment of it all.
The bit with Romeo trying to kill himself or Friar Lawrence desperately trying to stop it. Friar Lawrence, who, by the way, was my personal fave. Of the ensemble, because for some reason I found their Capulet very attractive. Let's be honest. He was like, hey, have fun in my party. Don't start shit, Tybalt. Macy Klompus, you were great as the friar too.
She was.
Just like a comedy of errors of, well, these kids are gonna die.
Well, I gotta try to be the responsible adult here. Dear God. What was the name of the one with the unicorn cupcakes? I did kind of enjoy that.
That would probably be Rosanna Pansino, our resident baker.
Yes.
And a resident judge for Without a Recipe.
Yes, that's true. Delightful Without a Recipe judge who never loses her optimism despite the travesties the boys have presented her with.
Oh, which that does make her a good fit for this then.
Oh man, this is gonna get sad. So to make myself feel better, I made some unicorn ice cream cone cupcakes. Oh, this story is so sad.
Which, that was pretty cute. That was cute. Yeah, I will say, the fact that you did double cast Benvolio as Balthazar did emphasize to me how easily the characters could have been one and the same.
Yeah.
Like, if a production did that, I would not blame them in the slightest. Plus, it would have kept Benvolio in on things.
There was also an after show you could have gotten tickets to. I ended up not, but I do wonder if there were any. Let us know, listeners, if you also saw this, if there's any fun info or behind the scenes stuff that we missed out on that we could have heard in the after show.
Yeah, no, definitely. I really do need to figure out a way for listeners to kind of reach out to us. But anyway,
we start a Tumblr blog and get an axe box like normal people.
Yeah.
Sure, why not? I will say it took me a while to figure out, okay, so why is this working so well for me in the midst of all this absurdity? And I think really part of what makes this work so well is, for one thing, yeah, for the most part, they are playing this entirely straight, in spite of all the crazy things they gotta do in this. But also, I think this absurdity makes the tragedy hit even harder, and vice versa.
Mm-hmm. I agree. No, I agree. 100%.
It's like the highs and lows of the play are like, you offset the absurdity with these deep, tragic moments.
And it, especially as the sad, tragic moments are happening.
And weirdly, it's not offsetting it at all. Like, damn, this was so good.
So, should we get into wrap-up thoughts about why Romeo and Juliet continues?
Sure, why not? Why does Romeo and Juliet endure, y'all?
With being who we want to be with, from us doing what we want to do, and we're perpetual hope that we can eventually overcome it.
I think, despite me saying that sometimes kids are like, wow, these characters are so stupid, it is one of the only Shakespeare plays that has characters that young of an age. So, in a way, it makes sense why that is taught first so often, because it's got characters that young with emotions so high in relation to what actual teenagers are going through. I do think it stands the test of time, as clearly it can be adapted into many different ways. I do believe it stands the test of time as an enduring story. I mean, if even Shakespeare adapted it, it's a classic for a reason, because it's got intense drama and stakes, and it's got all the merits of a tragedy where if just one thing had been different, it could have all turned out all right. And I think that's really compelling, even when you change all the swords into dildos.
I think for me, like I said, it's the old song and we're gonna sing it again, and the idea that you can adapt it and change it and over and over and over again. Like, you know, you can make it so that a couple fewer people die, but it's still the same bare bones. You know, this play demands a body count, but how many bodies you give it is up to interpretation. Another note I have is like, God, thank God I don't have to worry about the pressures of marriage anymore, because I think I would have killed somebody.
Like, there is something to be said about that. Like, I think people really do underestimate just what kind of pressures there were within this universe on them. It's like, both of their families are just constantly fighting in the streets. People are dying all around them.
Yeah, it's...
For Juliet especially, she is expected to marry. And back then, there wasn't a whole lot of recourse if you were unhappy with your marriage.
Yeah, it's the Pride and Prejudice defense of, yeah, you may not be happy with this fucker, but he would have kept y'all stable for the rest of your natural lives. It's interesting, like, you can make major changes like that, or you can make the change of, you know, West Side Story with, you know, oops, Juliet lives and decides not to take another life because she's tired of the bloodshed. The tropes are hungry and they will always feed. I think that's the reason that, like, with Romeo and Juliet, and again with Cinderella, is the sort of, like, my standard for how good an adaptation is how long I believe these kids are gonna get out okay, is I know the tropes are hungry. I know they must always feed. It's like, again, when you're watching Hadestown, you get pretty damn close to thinking that these kids may get out okay. And then the tropes get them. The story gets them. And you cannot stop it. And it's the best parts of watching a train wreck and the worst parts of having a story you really love get screwed over by the author. And that, my dear friends, is why Romeo and Juliet endures. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Yeah, there is just something about the tragedies we keep telling. Because, yeah, maybe it will turn out this time, but it almost never does.
Play has body count and it demands blood sacrifice.
No matter how silly the sacrifice may be.
Indeed.
It demands its blood.
I do love that they brought the Ice Bucket Challenge thing, especially since whenever it's brought up, I can't help but think, oh my god, that shit actually worked. It's
right,
crazy.
yeah.
Something that stupid actually brought good into the world, and I love that so much.
That's Shakespeare's ultimate legacy. Something that stupid brought good into the world.
Ultimately, I'm thrilled for how this turned out for the Try Guys. I'm thrilled with how it went. I can't wait for them to do it again.
Yeah, let's get back into that. What other Shakespeares do we want to see them do? We've already touched on Twelfth Night and Much Ado, but what other Shakespearean things do we want them to do?
If I can't direct the Midsummer Inn at IKEA, I want the Try Guys to do the Midsummer, but the play follows them through at IKEA.
Yeah.
You know what? That sounds exactly like something they would do too.
To be fair, that is the ideal place to set Midsummer.
If I don't have the money and the clout to close down an IKEA for a night to do something stupid like this, I want the Try Guys who have more money and clout to shut down an IKEA for a night and do a Midsummer Night's Dream in an IKEA.
This is way out of left field and something they would never do, but I want to see Eugene.
Hamlet.
Yes.
I was about to say, I want to see Eugene's Richard III.
Oh.
I've just been thinking about it. I would also see Eugene as Hamlet. And
in my perfect world where Hamlet is, peak 20-something post-grad, not even post-grad, in the middle of grad, because, remember, he's coming back from school on winter break. Undergrad has a mental breakdown over winter break, is also an accurate summary of Hamlet.
Yeah. I take it back. I want Miles Bonsignore as Hamlet.
Yeah.
Miles, who everyone go support Perfect Person, Miles' podcast. He just left the Try Guys.
Off, yeah.
Yeah, he left the Try Guys as a full-time employee, but they love him so much he's still going to be appearing. Now he's just appearing as talent. We love that for him on the tripod and stuff. But Miles Bonsignore as the goth Hamlet of our dreams, as we have seen from him being goth in all the candid competitions. I desire it. I need it.
Make Eugene Mark Antony.
You want?
Make Eugene Mark Antony.
Which Mark Antony? Because Mark Antony and Julius Caesar is very different from Mark Antony and Antony and Cleopatra.
Okay. Give me Eugene as Mark Antony and Julius Caesar. Give me Keith as Julius Caesar.
Oh, that would be promising.
Who is Brutus and Cassius, though?
Zach, of course.
Both of them?
Zach is probably Brutus. I don't know enough about the extended to cast Cassius, but...
Let's throw Johnny Cakes in.
Yes,
Johnny Cakes
Yeah.
was an actor before he went to Cakes.
Sure. Yeah, let's go for it.
Little known Johnny Cakes fact. If any of the Try team listens to this, listen.
We got ideas.
Hire us.
We're very cheap.
We're very cheap. Very cheap. And hey, Zach, I even went to Emerson. So, I don't have a film degree, but I was around the film people.
I have a cinema media studies degree, and I did spend a month at Emerson's LA campus.
That's true. Hire us.
Hire us. I can move to LA for a couple of months.
Oh, gosh. Any final thoughts?
This is runner-up for the best interpretation of the opening prologue. My favorite is still the one from Hopeless Fountain Kingdom by Halsey, with the I am a child of a money-hungry, prideful country.
Which, ain't that the truth?
Yeah.
I completely forgot. My final thought is, yes, indeed, Eugene as the nurse did eventually sit on Keith as Juliet's lap in this production.
Yeah, he did get a wig snatch. I saw the
outside.
Oh,
that is true. Eugene's wig almost fell off, and it was not the most intentional.
The whole sequence is enhanced by knowing the lore.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
but honestly, this was lovely.
If they do another Shakespeare play, Eugene better do an actual wig snatching on purpose.
Let's all just give it up for Eugene's Mercutio wig.
Yes.
It ate.
Those words aren't in the Bible, but here we are.
But this was a delight.
Plugs and pen count, or pen count and plugs?
Pen count and then plugs.
All right. I'm putting this as our 0.5.
Oh my gosh, that's a lot.
We have this many. 14 bucks.
Editor Jasmine here. It is a crime that I didn't think to do it is not yet 14 joke. That is my bad. $14. So I owe $26 as of this current count to the Creator Fund. So that's our first plug. Again, continue supporting the strike. And also, by the time this episode drops, there'll still be 5 more days where you could buy a ticket to check this out. It's like $10. Give it a watch. It's a really good time. I had a hell of a blast with it. Way more than I thought I would. Any other plugs?
I don't really have anything to plug other than support the striking workers. Don't be a scab. And do keep watching independent content like this in the meantime, because we should clarify, they are entirely independent, as are pretty much all of the creators that were in this
production. Support your local video essayist.
Yes.
Support your local video essayist and or YouTuber. Exactly.
I live in this podcast's walls. I also live in the walls of 6 Days in the Stardust Twins podcast, which should probably, hopefully, be out at some point, Sam. But I can be found on Twitter at Dreams Rebel. Hockey season is in 25 days. I'm sorry in advance. I'm about to become insufferable. I live in this podcast's walls, so I will probably be in at least 5 more episodes.
And I also live in the podcast walls, as well as the admin team with River. You can find me at Eswar Karuna on Tumblr. And when we finally get a Tumblr for this podcast, I will be in charge of editing and the graphics.
Is this how we made the decision that we're gonna start a Tumblr for this?
Absolutely.
Okay, you know what? I will get to it when I am done editing this week's episode.
I mean, I can make it. I've got side blogs.
Fair enough. Yeah. I'd appreciate that if you really don't mind.
So long as somebody does the theming for the website portion of it, if they want, like, all right, you can do all the coding, I can do all the formatting.
I love you guys.
We're the admin team for a reason.
Yep.
And as always, you can find me at Favor Vieira on Twitter, Tumblr, and TikTok, as well as this podcast at IERPod on Twitter. I am also excited to announce that October is officially going to be a celebration of monsters, the classic monsters. We will be doing retellings of Dracula, of Carmilla, of Frankenstein, of Phantom of the Opera, and finally, on October 30th, we will be covering The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter. I'm sure you won't want to miss it. Can't wait to see you there, and remember, stories gain power in each retelling.
A glooming peace this morning with it brings the sun, for sorrow will not show his head. Go hence to have more talk of these sad things. Some shall be pardoned, and some punished. For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo.